Hello, my name is Ben Andre Roxas, and today I'm going to be explaining my part of the project for Project 2. I did the list and delete command in the server file. But first I wanted to explain that I created a server files like folder so that for every time the Python or the server terminal opens up, it'll create a server file. And the reason why is because I wanted to create a separate folder for files such as test.txt and myfiles.txt. And the reason was because I wanted to keep it as exactly as it was shown in the example output in the project guideline. Because if I were to do the list command without the server file, it would show things like server.python, readme.txt, along with test.txt, but and all that. So I wanted to keep it separate. First things first, I created the list command. So in the server terminal, it would say something like list requested by username. If the person is logged in, it would say something like Alice or whoever the name is, and it would send the files. Else, if the user is not logged in, it will just say list requested, and it will just send the files. Then it will create a empty list labeled files, and then creates a for loop so that it checks inside the server folder, which in this case would be like test.txt or myfiles.txt or whatever txt or file it is, and verifies that if that file is a file, it will append it, meaning it will go into this list, and it'll be separated by commas, and it will give a 200 status code and then send it to the client. Next, I created the delete command. And in this block of code, this if here is that if it checks that the file name, if there's exactly one file name, it would just continue on. But if there is like not a single file name or if something's wrong with the wording, it would create a 500 status error. Next, it would label the file name. So let's say if we were to delete test.txt, it will recognize that test.txt is now the file name, and it will ignore like something like delete or something like that. In the server terminal, it would say something like, it would then say something like delete requested by username or whoever, like Alice, and then it will delete the file and whatever that file name is, which in the previous example would be like test.txt. Then it will, if there is no username, it will just delete requested and then deleting the file. Then it goes into this try block because sometimes there could be a problem where it can't find a folder or there could be an error occurring. It first creates a file path in which it combines the server folder and the file name, essentially saying like, hey, this is where that file is. This is where we need to look for. And then it removes that file completely. So it just deletes the file from the server's folder, which is right here. Then it would print out delete complete in the server terminal and will send a 200 status 200 status code. And if there's any issues, it will send a 500 status error code. Okay, so for this part, I'm gonna output how my list and delete commands work through the terminal. So first I gotta create my server file or terminal, and then my client. So if I do the list command here, it should say that it got requested by Alice and that it's sending the files, which it does, and that the files in the client should show that it's test.txt, which is true. So then if I try to delete test.txt in the server, it should say that there's a request by Alice and that it's going to delete the file test.txt and that the delete is complete. And now we can see that there is no more test.txt. So that shows that the delete and the list commands do in fact work.
My name is Stefan, and for the file transfer project, I implemented the store and retrieve commands. So starting with the store command, if length of words is not equal to, right? It needs to take in the retrieve command and then as well as the file name. And if it doesn't have that, then it just sends the 500 status code and it just skips the rest. Once it has the file name, it logs the request to the server console. Um, Here's just a little blurb. If username is not none, right? It just basically just to match the project format. Prints out store, prints out the file name, requested by, and then of course the username. And if it doesn't have that, it just basically the same thing, except it doesn't include here the username. So for here, it sends a 1 second timeout, right? Then it just loops, right? It reads the incoming bytes in chunks and then appends them to the buffer. It just keeps reading until the full second passes, right? We know new data, which is basically how we'll know that the upload is finished. Um, that timeout basically is what ends the transfer. It opens the file inside the server's folder and then just writes the data, right, exactly as it's received. It returns a 200 status code and it prints store complete. And of course, we wrapped it in the try and accept. So if any other reason it fails or anything like that, we throw back the 500 status code. So onto the retrieve command. Basically, same thing here at the top. Takes in 2 arguments, checks for the retrieve command, and it checks for the file name. And if not, it just sends back the 500 status code. And then the same thing over here, right? It checks for the username. If it's not none, then it includes the username here. If not, then it'll just print out this. So if the file is there, the server sends the raw file bytes straight down the data connection, and it just logs file sent, right? So the server sends only the file contents here in this one. And at the very end, there's a 500 status code for any command, basically, that the server doesn't recognize. All right, I'll show you how all of this works now. And now for the demo, let me just start the server in the client file. So I can just log in as Alice. I have a test.txt file in the project2 directory, so I can test out the store command. All right, so on the server, store txt requested by Alice. Of course, I'm logged in, and it prints as we see over here. Store complete, 200 status code received, file sent. Now let's test the retrieve command. So we have file retrieved, retrieve request sent by Alice. Sending file, which is the file name, which is test.txt, right? And then we have file sent here. All right, that's pretty much it for this send.
Hello, my name is Richard Marano, and today I'm going to go over the client-side file for project number 2. First off, I want to mention that the listener thread from project 1 I commented out because we used that listener thread so that the client could receive like broadcast and private message. The thread was always listening on the data socket in the background while the user typed commands. So for project 2, I commented them out because the new file commands also use the data socket to send and receive file data. And if the listener thread is active, it could accidentally receive the file content before the actual file command does. So to start here with the list command, it starts off like all the other commands previously. Asked to see if command is the same as list. If the user is not connected, they must connect first. Then it continues and make sure that list is typed correctly. Then it sends the list command to the server, receives the response, and then the server replies with the appropriate reply if it worked. If it worked, it receives the 200 status code from the server and displays the files that are in the server folder, and prints out the 500 status code if it didn't work. So now to continue here, the delete command starts off the same. Make sure that the user is connected. Then make sure that the formatting of the command is correct, delete in the file name. Then it receives a response from the server, letting the client know that the file was deleted. If not, status code 500. Then the store command starts off the same, log in, formatting of the command, receives the name, puts it in user parts 1. Here, it stores the file name into file data, and then it sends over the file data, which is the name, to the server, gets the response back, and lets the client know that the file was received. Here, the retrieve command starts off the same as the others, gets the file name, sends the request to the server response. If the server response starts with 500, then there was nothing to retrieve. Then if that doesn't fail, then we continue. Then we make a variable named new file name to display what file was downloaded from the server folder. And this retrieves the file from the server, or puts it into new file name, and prints that the files were retrieved. And that is all from the client side that was needed for project number 2. Okay, so now I'm going to demonstrate the client server working. I'm going to connect to the server. Connection established with the server. I'll log in as myself. Okay, now I'm going to see what's in the server file. The test.txt is in there. Now I'm going to store my file.txt. There we go, file sent to the server folder. Now let's check again. We have my file.txt and test.txt in the server folder. Now I want to retrieve the test.txt. And here we go, downloaded test.txt. Now I want to delete test.txt. And there we go. Deleted it out of the server folder list. It's out of the server file or folder, sorry. And now we will quit. And that's the demonstration of the client server connection working. Okay, so after running the client and server files, this is the initial connection from the client in red. The blue is the response from the server and the port given. And these are all the commands I gave to the server. The initial list, the store my file, the list again, the retrieve my file, the list, delete, the list and then the delete my file, and then the list. And as you can see, it's highlighted here. List, delete my file. This is the client talking to the server and the server responding back. Delete my file, response, the list, the initial quit, and then here breaks out of the connection between the client and the server.